My son threw water on my face. Cold, sharp, and deliberate, like it was meant to sting more than just skin. The stainless steel bottle slipped from his hand and clattered on the floor, but it was his words that cut deeper. "Relax, Dad. It's just water. You act like your whole life's been harder than mine." That was the moment I stopped being afraid to see what I already suspected. I stood there, drenched, breathing through clenched teeth, staring at the son I'd sacrificed everything for. And in his eyes, there wasn't remorse, just indifference, the kind that comes from someone who knows how to twist guilt like a knife. "You forgot to pick up the groceries." Again, that was what started it. Just another passive-aggressive jab over something I hadn't had time to do between my night shift and the insurance calls. He turned his chair, his custom-fit, $5,600 chair, and rolled into the living room like nothing had happened. Headphones on, screen glowing. No apology, no gratitude. For 15 years, my world had been engineered around Liam's needs. After the crash at Westline and Ridge, the one that left Liam partially paralyzed, and me with 2 cracked ribs and a legal file an inch thick, we got a settlement. Just over $380,000, minus the lawyers, minus taxes, minus the illusion that it would ever be enough. I quit my job at the dockyard. Took janitorial work because it gave me the flexibility to shuttle him between appointments. We downsized to a smaller apartment with ramps and reinforced railings. Every cent I spent, I logged. Every purchase justified. Because the money was meant to last his lifetime, and because I swore I'd never let him go without. But lately, the math hadn't been adding up. Twice last month I found withdrawals I didn't recognize. Not huge, $300 here, $175 there, but they were labeled specialist fees from places I'd never booked. I asked Liam, and he waved it off. Said his therapist was trying some new stuff. Then, 3 nights ago, I came home from work and saw him in the kitchen. He didn't hear me. The hallway light was off, and I stood frozen in the shadows as I watched him adjust the blinds. Standing. No brace. No wall for support. Just standing. When he finally saw me, he collapsed into the chair so fast, it looked like muscle memory. That was the moment. Not the water. Not the money. Not even the look. That collapse, theatrical, controlled, told me he had done it before. So I did something I swore I'd never do. I installed a hidden camera. I told myself it was for safety, to make sure no one was taking advantage of him while I was gone. But the truth? I needed to see it. I needed to know if the world I'd bled to build was real, or if I'd spent 15 years propping up a lie. The camera looked like a digital photo frame. Sleek. Silent. Slid in between the spice rack and the toaster. Liam didn't notice. 2 nights later, the motion alert split the silence at 2:43 a.m. I tapped the notification, watched the footage load, and watched everything fall apart. First beat. Liam shifted in his chair, looked around, pushed himself up, stood. Second beat. He adjusted his hoodie, reached for his sneakers. Third. He walked, without hesitation, without a limp, across the living room and out the front door. Fourth. 39 minutes later, he returned. Sweaty, breathing heavy, smiling, like he'd just come back from a morning jog. Fifth. He sat back down, repositioned the blanket, tilted his head just right. Back in character. I watched the whole thing from my truck, parked outside the textile plant, surrounded by the stench of chemicals and bleach. I felt something give inside my chest. Not a snap, a quiet, structural break, like the sound of a beam splitting inside a wall. I pulled up the banking app. There it was, a $425 transfer labeled PT support. Same timestamp as the footage. I checked his private Instagram, the one I wasn't supposed to know about. At Liam Unbound. Photos of cliffs, pull-up bars, wilderness trails. Him, standing, next to a woman tagged Coach Mara, both smiling like they were the ones who'd won the lottery. I sat there, drenched in silence, replaying the clip. Some lies you don't believe until you watch them in silence. I closed the app. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was done guessing. Done trusting. From that night forward, I documented everything. Receipts. Timestamps. Photos. Footage. If Liam had built a second life with money meant to keep him alive, then I was going to pull the curtain back on the performance. I wasn't his caretaker anymore. I was the man holding proof. The morning after the footage, I woke with a tremor in my hands, the kind that comes from sleeping too little and knowing too much. My head felt heavy, like grief had weight, like betrayal had gravity. When I stepped into the kitchen, I didn't look directly at Liam. I wasn't sure I could without giving something away. He noticed. "Morning," he said, eyes flicking up from his phone. "Too quick. You're jumpy. Didn't sleep well?" I muttered. He watched me for a moment longer than usual. Not concern, not curiosity, but calculation. Then he tapped his phone screen, and the display went black, locked with a speed that made my gut twist. Red flag number 1 of the day. He pulled his blanket over his legs. "So, did you bring the groceries? Or did you forget again?" I swallowed hard. "I'll get them later." He rolled his eyes. Unbelievable. Must be nice having only one responsibility. The contempt in his voice settled under my ribs like a bruise blooming from the inside. And then, as he turned away, he shot a glance, so fast I almost doubted it, toward the digital frame on the counter. My chest tightened. He'd never noticed that frame before. Not once. But now, the way his gaze flicked to it, and away just as quickly. Red flag number 2. I needed answers before he realized I was already finding them. I went to my desk and opened the settlement binder. The pages used to make me feel responsible. Now they made me feel complicit. Every receipt, every invoice, every withdrawal was a reminder of how thoroughly I'd allowed guilt to fog my vision. How many signs did I ignore because guilt turned me blind? How many excuses had I swallowed? How many small manipulations had I explained away as frustration or trauma? My memory served up one, unprompted. The time he demanded the newest, top-of-the-line wheelchair. $9,200. Said it would help with confidence. He used it for a month before the strain was too much, and it sat untouched in storage while I worked overtime to cover the shortfall. I used to think he was hurting. Now I wondered if I had simply been easy to maneuver. I opened the banking app. This time, instead of scrolling chronologically, I separated the irregularities into layers, patterns tightening like a noose. Layer 1, financial irregularities. Weekly charges to Flex Adaptive Coaching. Monthly fees from ClimbZone. Withdrawals labeled Mobility Tech Upgrade, with nothing to show for it. Layer 2, lifestyle anomalies. Receipts for high-end athletic wear. Performance supplements. Travel expenses I never approved. The specialist visits were lies and expensive ones. If the settlement auditors reviewed this mess, non-compliance meant fraud charges, lost benefits, frozen funds. We could be evicted. His medical access could vanish overnight. My entire life sacrifices could collapse under paperwork. Layer 3, the climbing footage. I opened his private Instagram, at Liam Unbound. There he was, scaling a rock wall, sprinting through a pine trail outside the city, hanging from a pull-up bar with a grin. Each video felt like a blow. Each photo, another thread snapping loose in the fabric of my reality. Then came Coach Mara. In one post, she stood beside him, smiling, proud. But in a training clip, she glanced at something off-screen, directly, unmistakably, like her eyes were meeting the camera lens itself. A flicker, barely a second, but it froze me. Did she know? Was she part of the lie? Or had she simply learned not to ask where his money came from? Either way, her presence meant the deception wasn't impulsive. It was supported, encouraged, reinforced. Layer 4, Liam's own words. In a video recorded on a mountaintop, he said, "People underestimate you. That's the point. Their expectations become your freedom." My heart broke, not from anger, but from the grief of recognizing a son I no longer knew. I remembered the boy who used to grip my hand when we crossed the street. The boy who trusted me completely. Now he looked at me like an obstacle to manage. A knock at the door jolted me. Mrs. Gilbert stood there holding muffins, smiling warmly. "Everything all right last night, dear?" Heard some thumping. Thought someone was running. My stomach dropped so fast I had to steady myself on the doorframe. Running. She'd said it so casually, so confidently. I forced a smile. "Oh, must have been the TV." She nodded and left, but the hallway tilted as I closed the door. Because she was right. And now someone besides me had noticed. At work that evening, surrounded by the thrum of dryers and the sharp bite of detergent in the air, I opened the footage again. The truth played out in grayscale. The standing, the walking, the jogging, the theatrical return to the chair. But this time, it didn't shock me. It solidified me. Grief settled. Anger cooled. Resolve hardened. I opened a new file. Evidence_log_2. Date. Time. Behavior. Supporting proof. Each line I typed wasn't revenge. It was survival. Because if the truth was the only thing I had left to protect, then I would protect it ruthlessly. I had spent 15 years saving my son from consequences. Now I would save the truth from him. By the third day after the footage, the air inside the apartment felt electrically charged, like the atmosphere right before lightning strikes. Even breathing near Liam felt dangerous. I could sense him studying me, small glances, little pauses, the way a predator pretends to be curious while measuring distance. At breakfast he asked, too casually, "What time's your shift today, Dad?" He never asked about my schedule. I forced a shrug. "Same as always." He nodded, but his jaw tightened. "Right. Just making sure." A strange comment, subtle, but sharp. Red flag number 1 for the day. He rolled toward the living room, but not before giving the digital frame a lingering look. Not a glance, not curiosity, but suspicion rising like steam off asphalt. That night, I watched new footage from the hidden camera. Not the usual pacing, not the casual stretching. This time, Liam was training. He stood in the center of the room, phone stopwatch running, and practiced movements with mechanical precision. 10 quick steps forward, 5 back, pivot left, pivot right, freeze in place, repeat. His footwork was too clean for someone recovering, his balance too deliberate. He even practiced how quickly he could drop into the wheelchair, timing the motion to make sure it looked sloppy and weak. This wasn't recovery. This was rehearsal. He wasn't protecting a lie. He was perfecting a character. His suspicion sharpened the next afternoon. I walked into the kitchen just as he jolted his phone out of view, tapping the lock screen a little too hard. "You scared me," he said with a brittle laugh. Then, quieter, "You don't usually move that quietly." He watched my face as he spoke. He was listening for the crack in my voice. He was searching for tells. Red flag number 2. I moved past him, pretending not to notice the tension radiating off him in waves. But as I set down my coffee mug, I caught him glancing in the microwave's reflection, checking my position behind him. It struck me then. He was scared of being found out. And scared people make dangerous choices. Back at my desk, I updated the evidence log. Hands steady, heart not. Evidence_log_3. 10 out of 16. Liam practicing timed footwork routines. 10/16. Rehearsed collapse into chair. October 16th. Asked about my work schedule. October 16th. Watched me in reflection, alert. October 16th. Locked phone immediately when approached. Each line tightened the narrative. Like connecting red string on a detective board. But it hurt to write them. Not physically, emotionally. Because the truth was becoming unavoidable. My son wasn't slipping away from me. He had already chosen to leave. The evidence log didn't just track lies. It tracked the death of the boy I remembered. The one who used to grip my hand at crosswalks, who begged me to push him higher on the swing. The ache of that memory nearly made me close the laptop. But hesitation was dangerous now. Even love could be dangerous. Just past 3 a.m., a noise jolted me awake. A soft tap at the front door. Barely audible. Then whispers. I opened the camera app. The footage loaded and my breath hitched. Liam, standing, opened the door for her. Coach Mara. Her hood was up, posture tense, as though she'd been watching the hallway before knocking. Liam kept glancing behind her nervously, like he expected someone to follow. She stepped inside, scanning the apartment with the wariness of someone checking for exits. Liam handed her a wad of cash, thick, too thick to be a simple training fee. Months of siphoning, maybe payoffs. She stuffed the money into her bag, but not before straightening the bills. A practiced motion. Then she froze. Her eyes drifted toward the counter, toward the frame. And for one terrifying second, she stared directly into the camera, her expression tightening as if something clicked into place in her mind. A beat of silence. A half second too long. A moment that made my blood run cold. Then she tapped Liam's arm, a warning gesture, and left immediately. He shut the door and leaned against it, breathing hard, whispering, "We're fine. We're fine," as if trying to convince himself. But he wasn't fine. Neither of us were. The next morning he played weak again, dragging his hand across his face, moving sluggishly, exaggerating every shift like a bad actor. But beneath it all, I saw the crack. His voice trembled once. A barely audible slip. Fear leaking through confidence. "Dad," he said, "you didn't touch anything in my room, right?" "No." His eyes flicked toward the frame again. "Okay, good. I just thought things looked moved. Nothing had been moved. His paranoia was showing. Red flag number 3. And the most dangerous one yet. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I backed up every file, every photo, every log entry. 3 drives. 1 encrypted cloud folder. A weatherproof box hidden under the spare flooring in the hall closet. While I worked, my chest tightened with grief. This wasn't how fathers protected sons. This wasn't how any of this was supposed to go. But the truth was no longer something I could ignore. It was something I had to defend. As I closed the laptop, a faint sound came from Liam's room. A notification ping, quiet but sharp, followed by the creak of his door shifting slightly. I froze. He was awake, listening, preparing. The storm wasn't building anymore. It was here, and I had to be ready for what my son might do next. By the end of the week, our apartment felt like it held 2 separate worlds, divided by an invisible but widening fault line. On his side, Liam moved through a life built on performance, controlled weakness, curated fragility, calculated innocence. On mine, there was only vigilance, exhaustion, and the kind of quiet dread that settles into the bones. He lived in a world where lies provided comfort. I lived in one where truth had begun to erode every foundation beneath my feet. Even walking from the bedroom to the kitchen felt like crossing hostile territory. And he felt it too. The shift in me, the thinning patience, the silence that no longer bent toward guilt. That morning, he studied me over the rim of his cup, too still, too observant. "You're up early," he said lightly, but his eyes tightened a fraction. "You're watching me lately." A tremor ran through my hand. I kept it hidden under the table. Just couldn't sleep. He nodded, absorbing that answer with a weight that didn't match his casual tone. You used to sleep like a rock." That was the first crack in his voice I'd heard. Not nervousness exactly, but a flicker of uncertainty. A hairline fracture forming in the mask. He dropped a spoon with exaggerated clumsiness. But when he bent to pick it up, the movement was too fluid, too strong, before he snapped back into his weak pose. As he straightened, something uncanny happened. His eyes slid sideways, not at me, but toward the digital frame. A glance, a calculation, a silent question. My stomach tightened. The fault line widened another inch. Work was impossible. My thoughts kept circling back to the footage, the lies, the money siphoned away under labels like mobility rehab and assistive upgrade. All of it had become evidence of a conspiracy unfolding under my roof. I needed to see what Liam did when he believed I wasn't home. So instead of driving to my shift, I looped around the block and parked behind the hardware store, where I could monitor everything from my phone. At 9:12 a.m., the camera alerted. Liam rolled into view, stopped, then stood. Not casually, not experimentally, purposefully. He locked the front door, something he'd never done in years, and then closed the blinds with a speed that raised every hair on my arms. No, no, no. He began pacing the room with tight, athletic footwork, checking his phone between sets. He practiced quick pivots, sharp, precise movements that reminded me of an athlete rehearsing maneuvers. He wasn't maintaining a lie. He was sharpening it. Then he froze, looked toward the alley window, waiting. At 9:27, the camera caught a shadow passing outside. A figure moved into view. Mara, though I recognized her posture before her face appeared. She knocked once, sharply, a coded tap. Liam rushed over and cracked the window open. Mara stepped closer, urgency radiating from her like heat off pavement. She paced in a tight, stressed loop. She tapped 2 fingers on the glass, snapped her hand once in irritation, then pointed fiercely toward the front of the apartment. Liam shook his head, jaw clenching hard enough that muscles pulsed along the side of his face. He kept stepping closer to her, then away again, as though torn between anger and fear. She leaned in, speaking fast, hands slicing the air in sharp gestures. Liam's breathing turned shallow. He ran both hands through his hair, a gesture he used to do as a child when overwhelmed. I couldn't hear the words, but their bodies spoke clearly. They were planning something, and it involved the frame. The moment shattered whatever remained of denial in me. I returned home later, pretending calm. My keys jingled lightly in my hand to signal normalcy. "You're early," he said, voice thin. "Slow day." He nodded, but tension rippled through him. His shoulders were too stiff, too trained. He tried to play fragile again, dragging out a breath, tilting his neck as if it ached. But the performance cracked when he looked toward the frame. Once, twice. His eyes measured the angle, assessed the reflection on the microwave door, then flicked back to me. Not fear. Strategy. At lunch, he nudged his plate slightly off-center. Can you move this? My arms, not cooperating. I reached out slowly. He watched the motion, not the plate. The moment stretched, held taut by silence. A single hum from the refrigerator filled the space between us like a warning tone. Then he broke it with a brittle laugh. Never mind. I'll manage. He didn't move the plate. He didn't eat. He just kept watching me, testing the shape of my reactions, testing how close the fault line had crept. That night, I replayed footage while the apartment slept. My hands shook as I watched the window exchange again. Mara's pacing, her tapping against the glass, her frantic gestures. Liam stepping closer, stepping back, panicked and pissed at the same time. But it was the end of the clip that froze me. Near midnight, Liam walked past the frame, paused. Then he angled his body, tilted his head, and checked the camera's reflection in the glass cabinet door. Calmly, intentionally. A slow shiver threaded down my spine. He leaned in slightly and whispered, I know you're watching. My breath hitched. My skin prickled. The apartment settled with a tiny crack in the walls, a sound that made the moment feel even more final. This wasn't just suspicion. He was preparing too. And the fault line between us wasn't widening anymore. It was breaking. The next morning arrived with a stillness that didn't feel natural. It felt arranged, engineered. The blinds in the living room were angled differently than I remembered, tilted just enough to change the direction of the morning light. A small stack of coasters had been moved from one end of the coffee table to the other. Nothing dramatic, but wrong in the way a single hair out of place tells you someone opened a drawer. Something had happened while I slept. I walked past Liam's door. The line of light beneath it was darker than usual. Not gone, just blocked. A faint shadow pressed against the gap, too solid to be coincidence. Maybe a folded towel, maybe a book. My heartbeat fluttered. That wasn't something you'd do by accident. He was preparing. In the kitchen, I tried to steady my hands long enough to pour coffee, but they wouldn't obey. I opened the camera app. No movement. Still quiet. Then his door opened. Slowly, deliberately. And when Liam emerged, his gaze went not to me, but to the frame. A quick calculation. A check of angles. Morning, he said. His voice was overly light, but his breathing wasn't. His shoulders sat too high, tension tucked just under the skin. Morning, I repeated. He wheeled forward, the wheels gliding silently across the floor. Too silently. He had oiled them, and I hadn't heard him do it. You seem jumpy, he said, eyes narrowing. Everything okay? Didn't sleep well. You haven't been sleeping well a lot. His fingers drummed once on the armrest, too fast, before he stilled them. Is something bothering you? The gentleness in his tone didn't reach his eyes. He was studying the edges of my answers now, not the words themselves. No, I said. Just tired. He held my gaze 1 second too long. Red flag number 5. I left the apartment to buy groceries. But before turning on the car, I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, feeling dread pulse through my throat. The feeling hit suddenly, a spike of clarity that something in the apartment had shifted permanently. Once I could breathe again, I drove around the block and parked behind the hardware store, pulling up the live feed. At 9:12 a.m., the footage shifted. Liam stood fully upright in the middle of the room. Not stretching this time. Not pacing casually. Training. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and moved into a pattern. Forward steps. Quick pivot. Retreat. Pause. Repeat. Faster. He paused mid-sequence and looked sharply toward the front door, checking the lock. He tested the handle once, then again, pulling softly as if verifying it hadn't been disturbed. Then he went to the window and flicked the blinds open a few inches, scanning the alley like he expected someone to be watching. He's unraveling, I thought. He's waiting for something. Then he grabbed his old gym duffel bag, the one he used before the accident, and brought it to the table. He began stuffing it with precision. A hoodie, climbing shoes, a portable charger, protein bars, and, new, a burner phone still in its packaging. At the bottom, tucked beneath the clothes, was a folded envelope. I couldn't see what it contained, but it looked thick with papers. A getaway bag. A hollow ache yawned open in my chest. This wasn't just betrayal. This was abandonment. like watching the ghost of a child I once knew packing up the last pieces of a life he'd lied about. Then came the knock. 2 sharp taps, the same coded pattern as before. Mara crouched at the alley window, hood low, posture rigid. Not calm, not anymore. Her eyes darted across the alley like she expected someone to spring from the shadows. She tapped the glass again, harder, urgency radiating from her. Liam rushed over and cracked the window. She motioned furiously, pointing down at the ground, then jabbing toward the front of the apartment, then mouthing something that looked like, now. Whatever she was warning him about, it wasn't small. Liam stepped back, jaw clenched, a tremor slipping through his hand before he hit it behind the windowsill. Then he shut the window abruptly, breathing fast, pacing in small circles. He pressed both palms to his face, then slammed one fist against the wall, a messy leak of panic he couldn't control. Another crack in the mask. When I returned home, the duffel bag was gone. Liam sat in his chair, blanket draped neatly, TV remote in hand, the perfect portrait of helplessness. "Hey," he said, tone soft and perfectly smooth. Too smooth. His foot twitched beneath the blanket. "You were gone a while," he added. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Fine." A beat of silence pressed between us. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. The lights buzzed faintly overhead. Then he glanced at the frame, once, slowly, before turning back to me. "Funny thing," he said, voice gentle but nose flaring subtly. "I could have sworn it wasn't pointed that way yesterday." The silence that followed felt icy and alive, like the moment before someone flips a switch. He wasn't guessing. He was probing, and he was getting closer. That night, after he fell asleep, the frame's tiny standby light blinked steadily, a heartbeat in the dark. I backed up every file again, feeling a cold inevitability settle over me. Because the more frightened he became, the more dangerous he would become, and whatever he was planning, I needed to be ready. By the next morning, the apartment felt wrong in a very specific way. The air wasn't just thin, it felt disturbed, lived in, rearranged. The mug I had left drying beside the sink was now 2 inches closer to the stove. A chair that had been pushed in was now slightly angled away from the table. These weren't accidents. They were signs. Someone, Liam, had moved through the apartment in the night. When he finally emerged from his room, the first thing he did was sweep his gaze across the living room. His eyes hit the frame in a quick, deliberate flick, measuring its position, its angle, its line of sight, before landing on me. "Morning," he said. Morning. He was too calm, and too tense. A balance only liars can manage when they're bracing for impact. He didn't ask if I slept. He didn't comment on my shaking hands. "You going in today?" he asked. He'd asked about my schedule twice in 2 days, something he'd never once cared about before. "Yeah," I said. "Same shift, right?" A slight tremor ran through his fingers before he stilled them. "You should let me know if you're running late." Not concern. Tracking. He rolled toward the hallway, but when something clattered faintly behind him, a draft rattling the blinds, he startled and instinctively put weight on his right leg. Just a fraction of a second. Just enough to reveal reflex over performance. Then he forced himself back into the chair, jaw tight, breathing too fast. Another crack in the mask. And before slipping into his room, he glanced once more, not at me, but at the doorway. Mapping exits. Whatever he was preparing for, it wasn't small. I left for work like usual, but halfway down the stairs, guilt twisted hard beneath my ribs. A wave of dread washed over me, sudden, cold, absolute. What if today is the day? What if I come back and he's gone? What if the truth moves faster than I can react? I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the wheel, breathing through it. Eventually, I forced myself to drive around the block to the same hidden spot behind the hardware store, a place I now parked often enough that the routine itself felt unsettlingly natural. From there, I opened the live feed. A few seconds passed. Then, the blinds moved. Not fully, just a slight sway, like someone brushed them off screen. Enough to unsettle. Enough to signal motion. My breath caught. Liam stepped into view, standing tall. His hair looked slept on, his eyes too sharp. He listened at the door, ear pressed flat, then checked the lock twice. After that, he crossed the room and tested the window latch. He wasn't paranoid. He was verifying, preparing for something specific. A pulse of fear went through me, the kind that feels like remembering the exact sound of the accident years ago. Sudden, shattering. Final. He grabbed his phone, typed quickly, wiped his palm across his jeans. His hand trembled. He steadied it with the other. Then he began pulling items from the closet again. But this time, it wasn't frantic. It was methodical. Hoodie, climbing shoes, protein bars, burner phone, flashlight, a folded sheet of paper, a second, smaller envelope tucked at the bottom. This was no rushed escape bag. This was preparation. A lump rose in my throat. Grief and dread braided together. Watching my own son pack a bag to run from me felt like losing him all over again. He zipped the duffel. Hard. Then froze. Head snapping toward the hall like he heard something. A pause. Silence stretched, tight, and thin. He exhaled sharply. Then, 2 taps on the window. Mara. She crouched beneath the sill, posture rigid, eyes scanning the alley like she expected danger. She snapped her fingers once, sharp enough to crack through the feed silence, then pointed down, then toward the front of the apartment. Her urgency wasn't vague anymore. It was military. Precise. Controlled panic. Liam leaned in close. His breathing stuttered. He whispered something I couldn't hear. Mara jabbed 2 fingers toward the frame's location inside the apartment. That made him flinch. He slammed the window shut, then pressed both hands to his face. A muffled sound escaped him, half panic, half anger. He paced in tight circles, then hit the wall with his fist, knuckles whitening. He was fracturing. Fast. When I returned home later, the duffel bag was gone. Liam was back in the chair, blanket arranged perfectly, expression neutral. Hey, he said with gentle smoothness. A practiced mask. But his right foot twitched beneath the blanket, a slip he couldn't hide. You were gone a while, he said. Had things to do. His eyes flickered to the frame. Then, after a beat of silence, so sharp it felt like something slicing the air, he said. Funny thing. I could have sworn it wasn't pointed that way yesterday. The refrigerator hummed behind us. The lights buzzed. The apartment seemed to hold its breath. He wasn't sure, but he was circling the truth. And circling me. That night, as I backed up the files again, the frame's tiny light blinked like a pulse. My chest tightened, with dread, with certainty. Because whatever today was, whatever he was waiting for, whatever Mara had warned him about, it had begun, and I was running out of time. I barely slept. Every tiny noise from Liam's room, each creak, each shift of weight, each faint scrape, felt amplified in the darkness. Around 5:20 a.m., a soft thump jolted me upright, the cold floor pressing against my feet, grounding me instantly. The apartment smelled faintly of stale coffee, even though I hadn't brewed any. Something had moved. I sat still, listening. A soft scraping followed, cautious, careful, like furniture being nudged into a slightly different angle. Then the delicate click of something being placed on the floor. My breath tightened. Liam usually moved loudly, dragging objects or letting doors bump into walls. But lately, he'd learned to move quietly. Too quietly. I only caught fragments of these movements because I had begun sleeping so lightly. I pulled up the camera feed. He wasn't in view, but his chair was. Not in its usual position. It was angled toward the hallway like a silent sentinel or bait. A shadow moved past the door. Walking, not wheeling. He was already up, already planning. In the kitchen, the dread sharpened. The drawer with spare batteries was open by half an inch. Not enough to look rifled through, but enough to show intent. The cleaning cupboard door was slightly ajar. The blinds, which I had firmly closed last night, had a thin slit of morning light cutting through. A surveillance arrangement. But not mine. Liam rolled in moments later, blanket draped neatly across his legs. He greeted me with the same soft morning, but his eyes kept darting, from the hallway to the frame to the window. Nothing rested in one place for long. You're up early, he said. So are you. He shrugged, casual but brittle. As he reached for the cereal box, his hand trembled, then steadied instantly when he noticed my gaze. A crack. A tiny one, but widening. When he looked away, a thin, frustrated sigh escaped him, almost a whispered self-reassurance. It's fine. It's fine. He likely didn't even realize he had said it out loud. Another crack in the mask. I left for work earlier than usual, a performance he observed closely. He tracked my movements to the door, posture stiff, shoulders tight. When it closed behind me, I lingered, hearing a faint exhale from inside. Relief or readiness, I couldn't tell. Down the stairs. Into the car. And then the routine. Drive around the block. Park in the concealed spot behind the hardware store, the place that had become ritual, not improvisation. I justified it to myself by its angle, its cover, its consistency. Then I opened the feed. Silence. Then movement. Liam wheeled into the living room, paused, scanned the door, then stood abruptly. He peeled the blanket off like shedding a costume and moved quickly, tension tightening through his shoulders. His breath was uneven, shallow, controlled only by force. He tested the door again, listened, double-checked the lock. Then he crossed to the window and checked the latch, running a finger along its seam as if verifying it hadn't been tampered with. This wasn't paranoia. This was a man anxiously confirming a sequence of steps. A memory hit me, the first week after the accident, when he had insisted I stay in the hospital room every night because he was scared of being alone. Now, watching him prepare to leave me entirely, it landed like a punch. He grabbed a small handheld mirror from the coffee table. My stomach tightened. He used it to check the frame's reflection, holding it at an angle to observe where the lens might be hidden, where reflections shouldn't appear. He was testing for blind spots. He'd studied the angles carefully. This wasn't discovery. This was deduction. He set the mirror down, then edged along the wall toward the frame, staying just outside the camera's direct cone. A calculated approach. At 11:09 a.m., his phone buzzed. He froze. Silence stretched, a breath suspended. He checked the message. His expression shifted, not fear, not relief, but a braced, brittle readiness. He whispered, Okay, I'm ready. My heart hammered. A dread-laced breath escaped me before I could stop it. Ready for what? He grabbed the duffel bag, heavier now. The corner of a document folder poked out. I recognized the type. Thick medical forms, possibly settlement paperwork, maybe forged notes, official enough to mean trouble. His movements grew clipped, rushed. Zip, lift, shoulder, exhale. Then he rested his forehead against the door. One long, shaking breath. Slowly, painfully, he whispered, He won't fight back. He never does. The betrayal landed sharp and immediate, a crack through years of sacrifice. He didn't know me anymore. He didn't know what I'd seen, or what I had become. He straightened, hand closing around the doorknob. He paused, the moment stretching like the world itself was holding its breath. Then he turned it. This was the threshold, the point of no return, and I had to decide whether to intervene, or watch him walk into whatever he'd planned. Either choice would shatter something permanent. He turned the doorknob, and for half a second, I froze at the bottom of the stairs, a single breath suspended between dread and inevitability. My hand tightened around the railing. My pulse hammered. This was the moment every sleepless night had been orbiting. I stepped from the car. The cold morning air bit at my face, sharp and metallic, grounding me in the reality that whatever happened next would change everything. By the time I reached the landing, the apartment door had opened, and Liam stepped out. No wheelchair, no blanket, no weakness. Just my son, standing on two steady legs, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, eyes wide with the realization that he'd been caught at the threshold. We stood inches apart in the narrow hallway, too narrow for both fear and truth to fit comfortably inside it. When he saw me, he stopped breathing for a moment. Dad, he whispered, voice fragile in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child. What are you doing here? I think I should be asking you that, I said gently, though my chest ached. His hand gripped the strap. His gaze flicked down the stairwell, scanning exits. That tiny movement shattered something inside me. He wasn't reaching for comfort or confession. He was calculating escape. Move, he said, voice low, strained. I don't want to fight. You don't have to fight, I said. Just tell me what's in the bag. A tremor passed through him. Real, not theatrical. His breath hitched. A flash of shame crossed his face so quickly I almost missed it. It's nothing you need to worry about. That's not true, I said softly. Everything in that bag is something I should have known months ago. His jaw clenched. You don't know anything. I know enough, I said. I know about the walking, the workouts, the missing money, Mara's involvement. He flinched at her name, a crack in the armor. And I know those papers you're carrying aren't harmless, I continued. Altered progress reports, old medical forms, documents you doctored to keep the settlement going. His eyes widened, not denial, but fear. Fear of being caught, fear of losing control, fear of losing me. Were you spying on me? he whispered, voice breaking. You were lying to me, I said. Stealing from me. Hiding a whole second life in that room. That doesn't give you the right. You left me no choice. Silence stretched between us, thin as glass. You were supposed to protect me, he said, voice rising. That's what you promised after the accident. And I did, I said. But protecting you isn't the same as pretending nothing's wrong. His breathing quickened. His eyes glossed. Panic, shame, anger, all colliding. It got out of control, he whispered. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I stepped forward. A slow, careful movement so he wouldn't spook. Then let's fix it, I said. Together. No, he snapped. You don't understand. If this comes out, the settlement's gone. The insurance will come after me. After us. Mara said. He stopped. Too late. What did she say? I asked. His silence was answer enough. I tried again. We can tell the truth. It'll be ugly, but you'll tell them everything. He cut in sharply, voice cracking. You always think the truth fixes things. That's your problem. The accusation hit hard. His eyes flashed, not hatred, but betrayal. Or the fear of betrayal. He looked at me like I was the danger. Liam, I said quietly. I'm not trying to hurt you. He swallowed, throat working. You already did. And then, the snap. He shifted his weight, a subtle, decisive movement. Preparing to run. I saw it a heartbeat before he moved. The duffel tightened against his shoulder. His muscles coiled. His breath locked. Then he lunged. That tiny moment, that single pivot, cracked the world open. I reacted before thinking. I reached out and grabbed his arm. Not to hurt him, but to stop him from sprinting down the stairs and disappearing into a future built entirely on lies. The duffel slipped off his shoulder and hit the ground with a heavy thud, the sound echoing through the hallway. A corner of the folder inside spilled out, forms stamped with dates, signatures, and notes clearly not written by a doctor's hand. He froze. So did I? The hallway felt silent in a way that made my heartbeat sound too loud. He stopped struggling. His breathing stuttered. The fight, or flight, drained out of him in seconds. Then I saw it, the crack before the collapse. His shoulders trembling. His jaw unsteady. His eyes darting like he was searching for a version of me he'd lost long ago. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered, a trembling confession. Neither did I, but I knew running wouldn't fix it. Lying wouldn't fix it. Silence wouldn't fix it. Slowly, gently, I tightened my grip, not restraining him, but holding him upright as his knees softened. We tell the truth, I said, and we face whatever comes. Together. His breath shuddered. A tear cracked loose, and for the first time in months, he stopped fighting. The duffel lay between us, its contents spilled, a monument to the lies he'd built. But he reached out, not for the bag, for me, and I held him, because some breaks aren't meant to be avoided. They're meant to be finally, painfully faced.